Inside the hidden crime empire run from a U.S. prison cell, the shocking investigation exposed. Before we dive in, hit subscribe if you dare. Stories like this only get darker from here. The inmate who ran a massive crime empire from inside his cell. The raid began at dawn, the kind of cold, blue-tinted morning where every sound echoed like a warning. Officers in tactical gear lined the narrow hallway that led to Tier D, the most heavily monitored section of Georgia's maximum security wing. No one talked. No one needed to. Everyone knew that inside cell 214 was a man who wasn't supposed to have power, and yet, somehow, he had built an entire criminal network one message at a time. His name was Marcus Hale. On paper, he was just another inmate serving decades for financial crimes that had spiraled into violence. But to investigators, he was something far more dangerous. A mastermind who had turned concrete walls and steel bars into the headquarters of an invisible empire. If the reports were true, Marcus wasn't just communicating with the outside world, he was commanding it. The raid was triggered after a woman across town received a call she shouldn't have. A call traced back to cell 214. A call that exposed something unbelievable. By the time the tactical team reached the cell door, tension thickened the air. Lieutenant Avery Ross, a seasoned investigator with sharp instincts and even sharper suspicion, watched the monitors from the control room. She had spent weeks tracking patterns in communication logs, financial transfers, and contraband activity, following a trail that led her here. Every clue pointed back to Marcus, but none of it made sense. How could a man locked in solitary confinement orchestrate so much movement? How could he run anything from a space no larger than a closet? The team unlocked the door. What they expected was a simple, barren cell. A bed, a toilet, a small shelf. What they found instead made the entire hallway fall silent. The room looked ordinary at first, until one of the officers lifted the thin mattress. Beneath it was a false layer of foam, expertly cut. And under that layer lay the first piece of evidence, a small, cracked smartphone wrapped in cloth. Another officer checked the underside of the metal shelf and found a second device, its casing hidden behind a strip of tape painted to match the steel. Then a third, wedged deep inside the wall vent. The count kept rising. 7. 10. Lieutenant Ross stared at the monitors, stunned. These weren't random contrabands smuggled in for entertainment. These were tools. Organized, concealed, intentional. The devices were labeled with tiny stickers, numbers, initials, symbols. Someone had created a system. The officers carried the phones out in clear evidence bags, their screens lighting up with missed calls and notifications as they moved. The names appearing on those screens were not the names of inmates. They were from people on the outside. People with clean records, ordinary jobs, and no obvious connections. But someone was coordinating them. And every path led back to Marcus. When the team finally entered the cell fully, they made their biggest discovery. In the corner, behind a loose concrete panel, was a notebook. Not the kind filled with doodles or diary entries. This one was full of coded lists, schedules, initials, and numbers arranged like a puzzle. But one detail stood out. A repeating phrase scribbled in the margins. The Blue Room. Ross felt the hair on her neck rise. The Blue Room wasn't a place. It was a term investigators had heard in scattered discussions between inmates, a nickname whispered in passing, a phrase that seemed to refer to some hidden operation, something that never fully revealed itself. And now it was in Marcus's handwriting. As the officers sealed the evidence and escorted Marcus out in restraints, he didn't resist. He didn't speak. He simply watched Ross the entire time, the faintest hint of a smirk on his face, as if telling her she was already too late. Back in the control room, the evidence bags lay under harsh blue lights, their contents sparking more questions than answers. Ross opened the notebook, flipped to a page marked by a folded corner, and froze. There, written cleanly in the center, was a list titled, Active Operations, Week 9. And under it, several initials. One of which belonged to someone Ross knew. Someone inside the prison. And that was the moment she realized Marcus Hale wasn't working alone. He had help, from the inside. Lieutenant Avery Ross shut her office door and locked it. The moment the latch clicked, She dropped the evidence notebook onto her desk and stared at the initials scrawled on the page. Most meant nothing to her, but one stood out like a bruise. RD. Officer Raymond Dorsey. 10 years on the job. Clean record. Quiet reputation. A man who rarely spoke unless spoken to. Not the type anyone would connect to contraband smuggling or organized schemes. And yet, the coded list in Marcus Hale's handwriting placed him at the very center of something enormous. Ross sat down, replaying every interaction she'd had with Dorsey. The nervous laughs. The way he avoided eye contact whenever Marcus's name came up. The unexplained shift changes. The extra time he spent near solitary wing entrances when there was no official reason to be there. The deeper she thought, the more the pieces began to align. If Marcus Hale had built an empire from inside his cell, he hadn't done it by magic. Someone had opened doors for him, literally and figuratively. Someone like Dorsey. Before Ross could dig deeper, a call came in from the warden's office. She grabbed the notebook, tucked it under her jacket, and headed down the corridor. The prison felt different now, heavier, darker, as if the concrete itself held secrets she hadn't uncovered yet. Warden Keller greeted her with a tight expression. "Ross, I just received the initial report from the raid," he said, hands clasped behind his back. But something isn't adding up. She knew what he meant. Phones didn't just appear. Not in solitary. Not in a place designed specifically to keep inmates cut off from the world. "We found coded schedules and contact lists," she said. "It's organized. Too organized." Marcus was directing people on the outside. Keller nodded slowly. "We need to figure out who brought those phones in. And why." Then he leaned forward. "And you're not the only one asking questions." Ross stiffened. "What do you mean?" Keller lowered his voice. "2 men in suits came by this morning. They said they were from a federal task force. They knew about the raid before I even sent the incident report." Ross's stomach dropped. That meant someone inside the prison had tipped them off. Someone who knew the raid schedule, which had only been shared with a handful of senior officers. She left the warden's office with more pressure than she'd walked in with. Outside, the yard was buzzing. Inmates gathering in small groups, whispering. Eyes following her. As she passed Tier D, several inmates thumped their fists against the glass, not in threat, but rhythm. A slow, steady beat. Almost like a signal. She felt it in her ribs. Back in the monitoring room, Marcus Hale sat in an interview chair, wrists cuffed, calm as the ocean before a storm. He looked up as Ross entered, and the smirk she'd seen earlier returned, sharper this time. "Lieutenant Ross," he said lightly. "You've been busy." She didn't respond. She set the notebook on the table, flipped it open, and slid it toward him. His eyes flicked down. No emotion. No surprise. Just calculation. "Who is RD?" she asked. Marcus tilted his head. "Someone who knows the value of opportunity." "That's not an answer. That's the only answer you're ready for." She clenched her jaw. "Phones. Contacts. Schedules. You're running operations outside this prison. You think we can't trace it?" Marcus's smile widened just enough to be unnerving. "You're assuming I'm the only one you should be looking at." Ross leaned forward. "We know you had help." Marcus's eyes sharpened, and for the first time, his tone dropped into something colder. "Lieutenant, you're chasing shadows. The real issue isn't who helped me. It's who I helped." Ross froze. Marcus continued, voice low. "Some people depend on me. People you trust. People the system trusts. If I go down, they go down with me." He leaned in until the chains on his cuffs rattled. "And that's why they'll do anything to keep me protected." Ross felt her pulse spike. Protected? By another officer? A supervisor? Someone in administration? Before she could ask more, the intercom crackled. "Lieutenant Ross, report to the East Wing immediately. We have a situation." She rushed out. As she reached the East Wing, officers were crowding around a supply closet. The door hung open. Inside, on the floor, lay a box that should have been sealed, a box containing confiscated contraband. But the phones were gone. Every device from Marcus's cell. Missing. The officers murmured, confused, scared. But Ross saw the truth instantly. Someone inside the prison was clearing Marcus's tracks. Someone who already knew she was getting close. This wasn't just a case. It was a war. The evidence they weren't supposed to find. Detective Mara didn't sleep. Not after what she heard beneath the Willowbridge tunnels. Not after the recording. Not after the voice that whispered her name, even though the case files were sealed long before she was born. By sunrise, she and Officer Kellen were back at the precinct, armed with the USB drive recovered from the underground vault. No labels. No timestamp. Just a scratched symbol, 3 intersecting lines, matching the same emblem painted inside the abandoned stairwell. Mara inserted the drive. The screen shook, then stabilized, revealing low-grade footage, clearly old, clearly unauthorized. A room. Concrete walls. A table bolted to the floor. And a single figure sitting perfectly still, face blurred, either by the camera or by the person who wanted it that way. Kellen leaned forward. "Play it." The figure spoke without moving. The voice was altered, metallic, impossible to place. "You found the stairs. You opened what was meant to stay sealed." Mara's pulse stiffened. This wasn't a warning. It was a response. The figure continued. Willowbridge was built on a fault line, not of stone, but of secrecy. The town protects itself. Anyone who descends below level 7 sees the memories we left behind, and the consequences that follow. Mara paused the video. Level 7? But she and Kellen had only reached level 4 before the staircase abruptly ended. Or so they thought. She rewound the footage. Behind the blurred figure, for a single frame, the image glitched, revealing a diagram on the wall. A blueprint. A vertical structure descending far deeper than any public records showed. "Wait," Kellen whispered. "That can't be real." "That's..." The rest of the staircase, Mara finished. Someone had built it. Someone had hidden it. Someone expected her to find it. She zoomed into the blueprint, enhancing the contrast. Along the empty shaft, a handwritten note ran down the margin. "The answers wait below. But not every truth survives the climb back up." She felt a cold push of dread. This wasn't some urban legend. This wasn't a prank. This wasn't coincidence. The staircase wasn't unfinished. It was interrupted. Cut off deliberately. Someone didn't want anyone going deeper. Kellen swallowed hard. Whatever's down there, someone buried it for a reason. She looked at him with a resolve she didn't feel. "And that reason is exactly why we're going back." But as she ejected the USB, the lights in the precinct flickered, once, twice. Then every monitor shut off in perfect unison. A single new message appeared on Mara's screen, something no one typed, no system logged in. Just 6 words. "Do not descend again, Mara Hart." Her blood ran cold. Whoever left the message knew her full name, knew what she saw, knew where she was going next, and worst of all, they were watching.